Everyone says that Rolex is out of reach, but that's not entirely true. Today, we are going to break down 10 Rolex models that you can actually go and buy for $10,000. We're going to talk about which ones are actually worth it, and I'm going to give you some references to target as well.
Now, my name is James. I'm a watch enthusiast, I'm a watch collector, and I'm also an advisor. And my main goal for you is that you know and love your watches. So if you like this type of content, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel, and check out my additional content down in the description below.
As we get started, I got to do my weekly wrist check. Today I am wearing my Omega Sea-Master 1200 meter Plo Prof in summer blue, released in 2023. A beautiful watch. I love it on the shark mesh bracelet. It's such a beast. It is one of the most heavy wrist presence type of watches in my collection, but I absolutely love it. So let's get into our first watch that we're going to talk about today, and that is the Oyster Perpetual from Rolex. Now, the Oyster Perpetual is kind of the foundation of everything that Rolex is about, everything that they're known for. Traces back to the original Oyster case from 1926, so obviously we celebrated the 100th year of the OP this year at Watches and Wonders. This was the first waterproof wristwatch, and the Perpetual rotor came later in 1931. Today it exists as kind of this purest expression of what Rolex is. It's time only, no complications, just the precision, the durability, and the everyday versatility that you would expect from a brand like Rolex. Now, let's talk about the reference that we want to actually buy. And I was looking at the 124-300. So the good news about this is a pretty modern Oyster Perpetual that you're going to be able to find here. And you have a ton of dial options. Everything from a classic blue or black to some pastel dials to silver and white dials. Like, you just have all sorts of options here. And these are not hard to find. The other thing is you might actually be able to get this from an authorized dealer, in which case you'd get it for like right around $7,000. But even if you can't do that, 9 to 10,000 pre-owned is what you're looking at for this reference, which again, overall for a super durable watch that can last you a lifetime is very, very reasonable. I do think there's pretty good value here with the OP, despite what a lot of people say with Rolex. And I'm not going to say that about every model. Just know that I'm thinking it in my head as we go through this video today. So the specs on these, you can find a wide range here as well. Again, the reference that I'm talking about is a 41 millimeter Oyster Perpetual, but you can find smaller, 36, 34. They're all over the board here depending on your wrist size. The case material is going to be Oyster steel, which is Rolex's classic 904L steel, again being more corrosion resistant than most of your typical steel alloys, and they make their own cases and bracelets, so you just know what you're getting with a Rolex. Lug to lug dimension, again depending on the size, is going to be anywhere from 43 to about 47 for the 41 millimeter Oyster Perpetual. And the lug to lug is again a crucial aspect of this. It's basically the distance across the wrist. Rolex has very comfortable cases, and these lug to lug dimensions are very wearable on a man's wrist, on a lady's wrist, kind of whatever you would like. The movement caliber in this watch is going to be the 3230. A very reliable movement. A lot of people talk about this movement, and you'll see it in others as well, because it's just a workhorse. Like, when you get to the superlative chronometer specification that you get with Rolex, where it's plus minus 2 seconds per day, you're truly getting that, and in many instances, a little bit better. So you're getting a real great movement with this. 28,800 vibrations per hour, or a 4 hertz frequency, so you get about a 70-hour power reserve, and you also get 100 meters of water resistance. Now, obviously with different watches that we're going to talk about today, they may not all kind of fit into that category. There's one in particular, but I will say that, again, to start out, the Oyster Perpetual, if I was going to pick just one watch that I could just go out and buy right now and I wanted a Rolex specifically, Oyster Perpetual is going to give me the most options, and I think that is a really crucial distinction. So let's move on to our next watch. And some of you will be familiar with the Rolex Explorer. Now, this is another one that I think is kind of a weirdly niche enthusiast category all in itself. Like, there are people who are just Explorer enthusiasts because there have been so many different versions of the Explorer, and it's been such a quintessential piece of Rolex history. So this Explorer was born from Rolex's involvement in Himalayan expeditions. So most famously, they had this 1953 ascent of Mount Everest. And it's funny because we think about other brands like Vacheron and Constantin that are introducing these Everest-themed overseas watches. Rolex has kind of been doing this since many, many years before that. So props to Rolex for just being a pioneer in this space. So it was designed as just a legible, durable tool for very extreme environments. And today, it remains one of the most purpose-driven watches in the catalog, built for the reliability, not for the attention that I think is associated with Rolex. This is like the quintessential understated piece when it comes to Rolex, because you just don't notice it. There's some different models here, but a lot of the watch is brushed, so it doesn't stand out, and that is one of the reasons why I think it's understated and a great buy from Rolex. So the reference we're looking at here is the 124270. So this is actually the current production model with these classic proportions. Price point, you're going to be anywhere from about $8,000 to $9,500. And when you look at the specs here, you again have not as many options as the Oyster Perpetual, but you do have some options. So you have a 36 versus a 40 millimeter case. Material again is going to be oyster seal, so very durable piece. Lug to lug dimension, anywhere between 43 and 47. Once again, the movement, the 3230, same as the Oyster Perpetual, 28,800 vibrations per hour, 70 hours power reserve, and 100 meters water resistance. And you can also say, I'm getting a modern Rolex for this. This is another one that you may actually be able to get at retail. That's not always the case for a lot of watches. So I do think that there's value in, especially if you are one of those people that appreciates the history and the heritage of what the Explorer was all about, this would be a great watch that is a first Rolex. You can add it to an already existing collection. It's just that classic black dial. Rolex with, of course, great lume. Rolex always has great lume on pretty much all their models, and that's one thing to appreciate about this one here. Next up is the Rolex Datejust. We can't make it through the list without talking about the Datejust. I do think this is another one where you're going to have an endless variation in models and options and dials and bracelets and bezels. So let's talk a little bit about it. So the Datejust was introduced in 1945. It was the first automatic wristwatch to display a date window that instantly changed at midnight. So it kind of set the standard for the modern everyday watch. In today's lineup, the Datejust represents versatility. It is equally wearable in a formal setting or in your day-to-day. And there are, again, different options you can pick that will maybe steer it in one direction or the other. So just to kind of give you your base options with the Datejust here, the first one is going to be your bracelet. So the classic Oyster bracelet is what Rolex is known for. You're going to see it on most of the watches that we talk about today. And it is that fantastic three-link design that Rolex has where you have polished center links, polished case in many cases where the lugs are polished and the side and flanks of the case. And then you have brushed outer links on the bracelet. So you get that nice contrast between brushed and polished on the Datejust in particular. But you also have now the Jubilee option. So this is a 5-link bracelet, same kind of configuration where you have polished center links and then brushed outer links. But the Jubilee totally changes the character of the watch. I have a Sea-Dweller in blue, the 326934, and I love it on the Oyster. I think it looks great. I still prefer the Oyster generally, but now they've introduced the Sea-Dweller also on Jubilee. It does very much change the look of the watch. I think the Jubilee looks like it goes with the Sea-Dweller really well. However, personally, I just prefer the Oyster. But again, it's an option. If you like that look, with a little more breathability, a little more comfort, kind of a silkier feel on the wrist. The Jubilee is a great choice. Then you also have your bezel on the Datejust. So smooth will be kind of your basic entry point because it's just going to be steel. So there's a little bit of a price break if you just stick with the steel smooth bezel. You can also go with a fluted bezel. So if you get fluted, you're talking about precious metal because that is the Rolex combination that Rolex uses of steel and then white gold for the fluted bezel. So just know that you do have options here if you want to fancy it up a little bit and make it a little bit more elegant and maybe not as rugged and sporty as the smooth bezel. Go with the fluted bezel. It is iconic. It is one of the things Rolex is known for. Again, on my Sky-Dweller, I absolutely love it, and I think it's a great combo with the Oyster case, even though both, to me, look great. They just give them watch very different vibes. So, price on these, anywhere from about $7,000 to $10,000. The reference that we're going to talk about is the 126200. And so again, this is their modern Datejust. You can go in, you can put in a request for a certain configuration, from what I understand, and you just kind of wait. And typically they can get you what you're looking for if you're willing to wait a little bit for it. You won't wait to eternity like waiting for something like a Sub or a Daytona. So just know that. Datejust is a great option. I almost went with it until I decided on the Sky-Dweller just because I liked the additional complication, but a Datejust would be a fantastic choice for a first watch as a part of a collection. Plenty of options here. Case sizes, you have 31, you have 36, you have 41, so again, plenty of optionality there. Materials, oyster steel. Rolex, again, would be that combination of steel and white gold. If you get into like the two-tone models, those are going to be a little bit north of 10 grand, so I'm not really going to talk about those much here, just because I'm trying to stick to on topic. And lug-to-lug dimensions, anywhere from 44 to 47 millimeters, depending on the size. This one, the 3235 is in the watch, so essentially the 3230, but just with a date complication added to it. Same specs from there, 4 hertz beat rate, 70 hours power reserve, and 100 meters of water resistance. You could do everything with this watch. It's a one and done. It's a formal. It's a to the office. It's a casual with jeans and t-shirt on the weekend. You can do it all with the Datejust. I do think from a versatility standpoint, we're not talking about being rugged and going mountain climbing here today. From a versatility standpoint, from my perspective, I think actually the Datejust is probably the winner on this list. So let's take that for what it's worth. That's just my opinion, but I do think the Datejust gives you a lot for your money and what you're getting. All right, moving on to the day date now. Now you might say, James, how the heck am I going to find a day date for under 10 grand? Now I will say you're going to have to do a little digging if you want to find this, but I was actually very just determined to figure out what else could be on here for roughly this price point. So the day date was launched in 1956, and it was the first watch to display both the day of the week and the date spelled out in full. So Rolex, again, we don't think of Rolex as innovative. They had a lot of firsts to get to where they are now, so just keep that in mind. They were made exclusively in precious metals. Quickly they became known as the President because they were associated with presidents, famous people, political figureheads, all those sorts of things. And in the modern catalog, it does represent Rolex at its most prestigious. They have, again, precious metals. Platinum is used a lot. They do have a different style bracelet that's kind of known as the President bracelet. So there's a lot that's different with the day date. Now you might say, what can I buy for $10,000 in the day date catalog if I'm getting precious metal? Well, you're going to have to go back a number of years. So the reference that I was looking at here in this price range is going to be the 1803. So this is a little bit more of a vintage day date. But I will say that these don't look that different from the modern day dates. Now, obviously, they've added a lot. So there's different metals, there's different dials, there's gem setting, all those things. But when you look at one of these from a distance, it looks very, very similar to the modern day dates. Again, just some are a little less flashy. But I think as far as what you're getting, it's pretty good stuff. So this is a whole different game. I don't talk about vintage a lot. I'm not into vintage. The only reason that I included this on the list is because, again, you can get a pretty modern looking day date that's actually fairly old. So price point, as you explore around here, be careful with what you would look at buying. You got to know the market a little bit more to get into vintage. So that's why I don't talk about it, because I don't know it. But if you're into vintage, or if you like the look of a day date, you can find some for right around that price point, anywhere from like $9,000 to $12,000. Obviously, if you get a better quality one with full box papers, those sorts of things, probably looking at the top end of that range. As you kind of drop off with the quality or with the character of where the watch has been, you lose a little bit of value there, and it's a little bit cheaper. So case sizes here, 36 to 40. Those were two case sizes that I believe are still the same today. Gold and platinum are the different materials that you can get these in. So any combination of yellow gold, rose gold, white gold came later from what I understand, but they are still available in some around this price point, and platinum. And then lug to lug, we're sticking right in that same kind of spot here, 43 to 47. So far, everything we're talking about is very, very wearable for you. The caliber, depending on, again, what generation of Rolex you get here, more modern calibers are going to use the 3255. A little bit older calibers are going to use something like a 1556. So again, just displaying the day at the top, the date at the 3 o'clock position, which Rolex is known for. Movement frequency still, as far as I can see back, has been that 4 hertz frequency. The power reserve, again, will fluctuate based on the model. Some getting probably closer to 40 to 50. The more modern calibers, obviously getting that 70-hour power reserve. Water resistance, just again, be cautious about this. The whole point of Rolex making its watches are to have water resistance. However, if you have a vintage watch or an older version of a watch, you definitely would want to make sure to get this water tested through either a factory service or some sort of service test, just to make sure that you're good before you go swimming in a pool or diving, light diving with your Rolex day date, especially if it's an older one. Let's move on to the GMT-Master II. You got to have this one on the list. It is one of the most important models in the catalog, so I can't omit this from the list. Now, the history of this one was, it was developed in the 1950s for Pan Am pilots who needed to track multiple time zones. That's how this whole dual time zone concept came about. And the GMT-Master II refined that concept with an independently adjustable hour hand in the movement. Today, it's one of Rolex's most functional travel watches and one of the most in demand. Now, I've talked about my Sky-Dweller. You're not going to find a Sky-Dweller for under 10 grand, partially because they came out in precious metal first, so they were even more expensive. And then in 2017, when they redesigned them, they did offer them in stainless steel, but they're still going to be more than that. So GMT-Master II is your only dual-time watch option from Rolex in this price point, so that's why we're talking about this one. Now, the reference would be the 16710, and I got to say, if you go and look at some of these, go to Chrono24, check it out. You can find some really, really great-looking examples of this that look, almost like a brand new model. Like, they're pretty great condition to an impressive level, and I think that matters a lot. So just, again, keep in mind, you got to know what you're looking at. Try to find box and papers when you can. This tends to be a little bit on the edge of the $10,000 price point, so you might spend a little bit more to get a nice instance of this, but in my opinion, it can be worth it. So just know you're going to maybe spend a little more than 10 grand to get yourself a nice GMT-Master II. Case size here has been 40 for forever, as far as I can tell. The material, again, is going to be oyster steel. This is where you started to get into the different colored bezels. So some with aluminum bezels. Obviously, the modern ones have ceramic bezels on them. So that's going to be a little bit different depending on which generation you go for. Lug to lug, usually about 48 millimeters, so a little bit on the larger side in terms of how they wear. The caliber here has been the 3285 for quite a while now, as far as I can see looking back. Frequency is 4 hertz. The 70-hour power reserve is still going to be in effect, and the water resistance at 100 meters, which, again, for this model being a little bit older, still would be a good thing to get water tested here just to make sure that you're good to go before you swim with your slightly, we call it maybe neo-vintage GMT-Master II. Let's talk next about the YachtMaster. And I have to say, of all the watches on the list, this one might be my favorite. It may not be as versatile or as rugged as some of the other ones we've talked about so far, but from a design perspective, from what it represents, and just the overall aesthetic of the YachtMaster, I think it's awesome, and I think you get a lot in this type of watch. So this watch, this model, was introduced in 1992, where the YachtMaster kind of took the Submariner platform and elevated it with a little bit more luxurious materials and finishing. So it was not built as the hardcore dive tool that the Submariner was supposed to be, but it was more a refined maritime watch. Today, it kind of sits as the more understated, a little more lifestyle-oriented sports model in the lineup within Rolex's catalog. And again, it is just one of my favorites from a design perspective. I absolutely love this watch. Now, the one we're going to talk about is the 16622. And this thing is really freaking cool. It's been great for a long time, and it still kind of just holds that position in the catalog. So with this model, you're getting Rolesium. We talked about Rolesor already. Rolesium is a combination of stainless steel and platinum. You get platinum on a watch from Rolex for under 10 grand. Thumbs up. So the great thing about this is you have a stainless steel case. There are a couple different sizes here. 37, 40 typically are going to be the ones you'll find in stainless steel. The bezel is platinum. So when you see that real bright combination of brushed and polished timing bezel that it does have, which is great and very helpful, you also get a platinum dial on this watch. Like, how cool is that? You have a platinum bezel and a platinum dial on a watch for under 10 grand from Rolex. Like, you just wouldn't necessarily think that, but that's what you're getting. And again, there are some very beautiful ones from the 2010 era, somewhere in there, that look great for what you're paying. So, lug to lug, 46 to 50 millimeters here, depending on the size that you get. The movement caliber, the 3230 or the 3235, depending on, again, which model family you're buying from. 4 hertz beat rate, 70-hour power reserve again, and 100 meters of water resistance. The reason that I love this, one of many reasons, is because it's like they found a way to combine a marine nautical watch with a really nice, dressy looking piece that also has the versatility of the other ones we've talked about, Oyster Perpetual, Explorer, etc. So I do think, again, this is my personal favorite in here. I love especially some of the newer models in the catalog. The blue dial is gorgeous. The rhodium dial is fantastic. And this platinum dial, probably not as appreciated anymore because it's not been made in a few years, but it looks spectacular. And it could be a very easy one and done for your collection or your Rolex collection, depending on what you're doing. Next up, we're going to talk about the Sea-Dweller. And I'm putting this in this order for a specific reason because I actually like this more than the Sub. It's a very controversial statement, but I like it more than the Sub. I think it's more interesting because it is the epitome of what the Sub is for in its true form. That's just a personal kind of thought that I have. So the Sea-Dweller was developed in the late 1960s for professional saturation divers working at really extreme depths here. It introduced the helium escape valve to solve real-world diving problems to avoid having pressure that builds up in the watch to where you'd end up with moisture in the watch. Today, it remains one of Rolex's most serious tool watches, engineered far beyond what you would need in a day-to-day wear. And there's something to me that's cool in the same way that my Ploprof kind of does the same thing. I am not a diver. I am not a professional diver. I barely go swimming, maybe on vacation a little bit, like a few inches below the surface. But having something that is just made in the most extreme fashion for whatever it's doing, to me, is just really cool. And that's why I like the Sea-Dweller. So the reference that I'm looking at here is the 16600. This is a classic style and size at 40 millimeters. again, with that tool watch kind of heritage. So you're talking like early to mid 2000s for this reference, which again, you can still find in great condition. Price point is going to be a little bit on the cusp of 10K there, so maybe a little bit under to a little bit over, depending on, again, the quality and the year, make, and everything. The sizes that you have here, you'd be looking at either a 40 or a 43. This is where you start to get a little bit into the beefy watch category. We're not really talking too much about thickness, but these watches can be very thick, so just be aware of that. Be ready for that. It's not going to be your thin Oyster Perpetual here. So Oyster steel is the case, a lot of brushing on the case, so again, has that tool watch feel to it. Lug to lug dimension would be 47 to 50 millimeters. The movement caliber would be either the 3135 or the 3235, depending on, again, when you buy the watch from. 4 hertz beat rate, 48 to 70 hours of power reserve, depending on which of those two calibers you get. And the water resistance, no joke, 1,200 meters, roughly. So just know that if you need it, you got plenty of water resistance on the Sea-Dweller. This would be a much safer option than your vintage day date to take on vacation or to take swimming. So just go after the Sea-Dweller. Personally, I do really like the newer Sea-Dwellers. The James Cameron, I think, is probably my favorite dial on any Sea-Dweller, but obviously you're going to pay a little bit more for that. Probably going to be closer to the $12,000 to $15,000 range. So that's the Sea-Dweller. Now, moving on to another supremely underrated model in the Rolex catalog. We're going to talk about the Rolex Air-King. And the Air-King dates back to the 1940s and was created to honor Royal Air Force pilots. Now, the modern version leans into that aviation heritage with bold instrument-style numerals, as you can see on the dial. Almost looks like it's straight out of a race car or something like that. In today's catalog, it's one of the more distinctive and unconventional Rolex sports watches. This is, to me, is a great example of what to do with a brand like Rolex. Don't go after the stuff that everybody else is going after. Stop chasing the hype around the brand. It is not worth it. Of course, if you actually genuinely love the model, it has some special meaning to you. There's some heritage or history that you love behind it. I'm all about that. But don't go after a model just because it's hyped and it's talked about and it's popular. I would much rather go after the Air-King. So this time we're talking about the 126900. This again is the current production model with a unique dial on it. Another addition that they made in the most recent iteration of this was they added crown guards to the watch. Kind of changes the character a little bit, but I do like it. And then they added the 0 in front of the 5. Seems like a small detail, but I actually do think it looks more balanced with the updated dial, so I do like this one. Brand new, out of the box, you're looking at $8,150. So on secondary market, anywhere from probably $7,000 to $9,000 is where you can find this one. A great value buy because you can get it right around the retail price point, even pre-owned, which is great. So definitely something to look out for. Case size here, 40 millimeters, Oyster steel case. You have everything brushed, but then you also have a nice polished bezel that's smooth. 48 millimeter lug to lug, relatively wearable. Caliber 3230 here, no date or anything, just a plain time only watch. With a center seconds hand that is green and that matches the Rolex green on the dial. I haven't talked a lot about the dial decoration on these watches, but these couple little details, the yellow crown, the golden Rolex crown 5-point coronet, the green Rolex text, and then the green seconds hand on this watch absolutely make the watch for me, and it's really fun. I didn't really talk about it with the YachtMaster either, but same deal there. Little red pops of color. On the new ones, you get blue or you get red pops of color. Just very, very cool. So, and then 100 meters of water resistance, 70-hour power reserve. A great all-around sports watch that, again, could be worn in a formal setting. Probably the dial's a little bit crazier than what you might be used to in a formal setting, but the watch itself looks fantastic. Moving on to another watch that I think is supremely underrated and would probably be, if I was going to buy a watch on this list, this probably would be the watch that I would buy. So we're going to talk about the Rolex Milgauss here. The Milgauss was introduced in 1956 for scientists and engineers who worked around strong magnetic fields. Hence the little quirky detail that we're going to talk about in a second. Its name literally means resistance to 1000 Gauss, with its anti-magnetic shielding done through a Faraday cage inside the watch itself, and unique design. It does stand as one of Rolex's most purpose-built and now discontinued models. So the reference that we're talking about with this is going to be the 116400GV green crystal. It is discontinued. Price point, you're going to look around probably 8 to 10,000 here. And the specs are basically just your straight up standard Rolex stainless steel model, 40 millimeters, oyster steel again. You get the design elements though that I do like, again with a polished center link and a brushed outer link on the bracelet, and then a polished case. So a little bit different than some of the others we've talked about. 48 millimeter lug to lug, caliber 3131. So again, this movement has a iron Faraday cage built around it to protect it from magnetic forces. 28,800 vibrations per hour, 48-hour power reserve, and 100 meters of water resistance. Now this watch has some of the coolest design elements of any Rolex in the catalog in general. It has a couple of things. So you have the 5-point coronet at the top at 12. You've got the Rolex text in there. This particular model, again the 116400, has an orange Milgauss text right underneath it at the top. So that's the first neat little detail about it. The second neat detail is the hour markers are actually different colors. So on many of the more recent models, you get these stick indices that have white insides because they're lume, so they're, luminova, so you can see them in the dark. This model has white, and then at the quarters, or I guess at 9, 6, and 3, it has orange markers. So you have this neat little pop of color. In addition to that, you have a seconds track around the outside of the dial that also has orange accents at each 5-minute or second increment, however you look at it. But my favorite detail, well, two actually, my favorite details about this watch, one, the quirky lightning bolt second hand. Like, how freaking cool from a brand like Rolex that is so conservative and is known for taking millennia to make any changes to their watches. How cool is it that you have a lightning second hand on this watch? I just think it's one of the neatest details ever. And then the other thing that I like about it is the crystal itself is not just clear, it also has a green hue to it. So it's a green crystal. So if you look at it or see it from a side view, and in some cases even straight on, you can see it, but you'll notice this green shimmer around the outside of the crystal. That's not some color they've added into the watch. That's actually the crystal itself being colored. So just two details that I think are really, really amazing with the Milgauss. I really appreciate what they did with this. Again, it's kind of just the epitome of like a nerdy engineer's watch. And I'm a nerdy person myself, and engineers are awesome. So like, I just love what this looks like. Personally, I do love the Z Blue dial. That one was a little bit more, obviously, if you look for that. But it's not way more than what you're seeing at this price point. You'll just pay a little bit more because people like the color. There was also a white dial. So there are some different options here. But again, to keep it in the 8 to 10K range, black dial is the one that we are going to cover. Now, the final model that we are going to talk about on this list is, of course, the Submariner. Because you can't make a list of Rolex watches for $10,000 without including the Submariner. And candidly, I don't really want to include it on this list because it's the watch that I'm probably least excited about of any of the watches that we've talked about. Now, you know the name of this channel. It's the Satisfied Watch Collector. I want you to be satisfied with what you have, and I think for me that's why I don't really get excited about the Sub, because I do think it's gotten plenty of hype over the years. Everybody wants one. Everybody has one. Everybody in the office has one. I'm exaggerating a little bit. But to me, this is just a little bit boring. It's classic. It's timeless. There's nothing bad about the watch. I just think from a design perspective, I would take a Milgauss all day long over a Submariner, and that's just my personal opinion. But I also want you to find the watches that you like, so that's why we're still going to talk about this watch regardless. So launched in 1953, the Submariner is one of the two, along with the Blancpain 50 Fathoms, that really defined the modern dive watch as it is today. It introduced the rotating bezel and set the standard for underwater legibility and durability. And today, it's not just Rolex's most iconic model in the catalog, but it is the blueprint for the entire dive watch category. I have to say this and give it the credit that is due. Every modern brand that makes some sort of dive watch is taking a bit of a cue from the Rolex Submariner. If you see watches that are basically cheap versions of luxury watches, the designs they use are often based on the Submariner. So you cannot discount what Rolex has done with the Sub, and that's not at all what I'm trying to do. I'm not here to poo-poo on Rolex. I like Rolex a lot, actually. But for me, the model is just probably the least interesting. So the reference that we're going to talk about is the 124060. It is the modern Submariner model, and there are Submariners, and then there are Submariner dates. The original Submariner has no date. The new Submariners have dates on them. So I'm not going to say it's a no-date sub, so just know that that's how we're going to use the verbiage in this conversation. Price point, $10,000. $10,050 if you can get one new at retail, which probably is going to be hard to get unless you do have a decent purchase history at an authorized dealer. So just know that going in, I knew nothing about Rolex and the authorized dealer game and wait lists and all those things when I bought my Sky-Dweller. So if you know nothing about Rolex, just know that. You're probably going to need some sort of purchase history to be able to get this watch. Start with an OP, start with a Datejust, get an Air-King at retail, because that would be amazing over something like the Sub. But it is what it is. Case size on the modern Sub, 41 millimeters. It is oyster steel. Classic ceramic bezel here. This is another one of the things that Rolex kind of pioneered with their ceramic bezels. Lug to lug dimension on this, 47.6 millimeters, so it is fairly wearable. Thickness of about 12.3 millimeters. We talked about it in this watch just because it's very relevant. It is the essence of Rolex and everything they are. Movement caliber, 3230 or 3235, depending on whether you have a date or not. 4 hertz beat rate, 70-hour power reserve, and a nice 300-meter water resistance. So I will say that of all the watches on this list, with the exception of the Deep Sea, this is going to be your most water-resistant watch if you do actually like doing some sort of aquatic water sports, some light diving, even some reasonable diving at that depth. So you can really do a lot of water activities with this watch and feel completely safe with it. So those are 10 Rolex watches that you can buy today for $10,000. You don't have to be super ultra rich to own a Rolex. I think for me, I'm most interested in you owning a Rolex that you like and that's interesting. If the Sub is what it is, that's what it should be. Don't let my opinion sway you, because I want you to know and love the watches that you want to own. So the question for today is, if you are going to actually buy one of these, which of these Rolex models would you buy and why? Leave me a comment down below. And if you liked this video, if you like this style of going through it like this, and you're just kind of like a watch explorer, you like just getting exposed to different models and brands, take a look at one of my other podcasts where I did go over 10 Grand Seikos that you could buy for $5,000. So half the price point of what we're talking about today, just proof that there's plenty of affordable value in luxury watches. So thank you for being here. I appreciate you stopping by the video, and I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.